You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
I want you to stop what you're doing just for a second and imagine something. What if your next major enterprise client was not a human being?
Right, like not a person at all.
Exactly. What if the entity reviewing your pricing, checking out your features, and ultimately signing off on a massive contract was literally just a piece of autonomous code with its own budget?
It sounds completely absurd, I know, but that exact scenario is already rewriting how businesses operate.
Yeah, which is just wild to think about.
We are watching autonomous agents transition from, simple assistants to primary buyers, and it is happening way faster than anyone anticipated.
As your vocal technologist, your tech-savvy mate who actually reads the manuals so you do not have to, I am constantly looking under the hood of where tech is heading. Welcome to Product Thursdays. We are unpacking a massive collision in the tech space. We are talking about artificial intelligence smashing headfirst into human psychology and the incredibly messy reality of building products people actually want to use.
And the really fascinating part is that while the technology itself is moving at blinding speed, the absolute bottleneck, without fail, is human behavior.
Always is, right? Humans ruin everything.
Pretty much. I mean, we build these perfect mathematical systems, and then we have to deploy them into environments driven by office politics, sheer panic, and fundamentally flawed metrics.
We are exploring exactly how that tension plays out. So grab your coffee and let us get into it. Look at this whole machine consumer idea in our notes because it completely breaks everything we know about selling.
It really does. It flips the whole model.
For decades, the entire tech industry has been obsessed with user interfaces. We want beautiful buttons, emotional marketing, frictionless checkouts. But if your buyer is an AI agent, it does not care about your carefully crafted gradient on a landing page, does it?
Not in the slightest. An AI agent is a completely different kind of decision maker.
Right.
This creates an entirely new growth channel that, honestly, most companies are completely unprepared for. When an AI evaluates a product, it is looking for an API.
Yeah, it just wants the raw data.
Exactly. It wants to know if your service is easily callable, if your documentation is flawless, and if your pricing structure can be parsed instantly. It evaluates cost effectiveness in milliseconds.
Hold on. I am struggling with this a bit. If an AI evaluates an API in milliseconds, how does it actually judge quality? Just to ground this for a second, when we say API here, application programming interface, we are basically talking about the digital native language, correct? Like a restaurant menu specifically designed for a robot to read.
That is a perfect way to look at it. A human needs a beautifully designed web page with pictures of the food.
Right, making you hungry.
Spot on. But an AI agent just needs the raw data, the item, the price, the ingredients, all delivered in a structured text format. The bot judges quality based on how predictable and stable that menu is.
So if it changes format, it breaks.
Yes. If the API returns errors, or, if the documentation is confusing for a language model to parse, the AI agent simply moves on to your competitor.
Wow. So we are literally having to optimize pricing and content for machines rather than humans. Winning means being the most readable block of text for an algorithm.
Precisely. And the companies winning this race are embedding themselves directly into the tools these agents already use. But this brings up a terrifying flip side.
Oh, here we go.
Because if AI agents are moving fast enough to execute purchases and make technical decisions autonomously, well, they are also moving fast enough to break your entire security infrastructure.
Right, the supply chain attacks. This part legitimately made me do a double take. Wait, explain how that actually works. What is stopping the system from flagging malicious code?
Well, it comes down to a vulnerability in how AI writes code, specifically a tactic called typo-squatting combined with AI hallucinations.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let us say an autonomous agent is tasked with solving a coding problem, and it decides it needs an external library to parse data. The AI might hallucinate or guess a name for a library that sounds completely logical, like Data Parser version 2.
So the AI just invents a name that it thinks should exist.
Yes, it just makes it up. And bad actors anticipate this. They upload thousands of compromised libraries with these exact legitimate-sounding names.
Ah, that is so dodgy.
They are explicitly designed to trick bots. The agent searches for the library it just imagined, finds the exact match uploaded by the hacker, assumes it is safe, and installs it instantly.
Wait, for the folks listening who might not be in the engineering trenches, what about the approval process? A pull request is essentially the human approval stage, right? Does the bot bypass that entirely?
That is exactly the issue. A pull request is the moment a human engineer...
A vanity check.
But autonomous agents are increasingly given permission to bypass human review for what are deemed routine library updates.
Which, yeah, is exactly as terrifying as it sounds.
Yeah. The back door is open and malware is injected before a human engineer even reviews the logs. We are handing over both the wallet and the keys to the warehouse without having the security infrastructure ready to handle the speed of autonomous action. We are trusting these agents to act on our behalf before we even understand how to properly audit them.
Which brings us to a really uncomfortable question. If we are handing purchasing power to bots because humans are too slow, what happens when those same humans use AI to build the products the bots are buying? We've suddenly removed the speed limit on creation entirely.
It introduces a profound shift in capability, often referred to as the two worlds concept. In the first world, AI raises the baseline capability across the board.
Right, everyone gets a boost.
We are seeing AI prototyping tools where product managers can test complex ideas insanely fast with real users. You do not need to wait 6 months for a slow engineering build anymore. You can spin up a functional prototype in days.
But the second world is where the trap lies, right? If everyone can, build an app in a weekend, just having an app is not special anymore. It is just basic entry stakes. The intrinsic value of merely creating something drops to almost zero.
Precisely. In an environment of infinite supply, the commodity becomes worthless. As output gets faster and cheaper, what do you think becomes the only real differentiator?
Look, it has to be taste. Giving everyone AI prototyping tools without teaching them product strategy is like handing a toddler a nail gun.
Oh, wow.
Sure, they will build something incredibly fast, but you definitely do not want to live in it.
That is a very vivid way to put it, but yes.
The output is technically flawless, but the story is complete garbage. The value is not in the ink anymore. It is in the author deciding what story actually needs to be told.
I really like that analogy. Think about it like photography. When film was expensive, taking an in-focus photo required technical mastery.
You really had to know what you were doing with the aperture and all that.
Exactly. Now, the smartphone camera does the technical work perfectly every time. What makes a great photographer now is their eye. It is where they choose to stand, what they choose to include in the frame, the emotion they capture. That is taste.
And taste is not a feature you can just code in.
No, it is not. Without deep human judgment and an understanding of context, fast output just leads to an infinite sea of shallow, repetitive work.
I see this constantly in the design industry. We are completely overemphasizing visual polish. Everything looks absolutely gorgeous, but they are neglecting actual usability. Just making it look pretty is the easiest part of the job now, because the tools handle the visual polish automatically.
You are absolutely right. In software development, if AI writes the code, your value is deciding what problem actually deserves to be solved. Which is why the best AI prompt is not some complex, multi-layered technical command.
No.
The best AI prompt is actually just a well-defined user story.
What do we actually mean by a user story in this context? Let us define that for the listener.
A user story is a tool from software development that forces you to understand the human problem. Good output from AI requires strong context and precise acceptance criteria.
And acceptance criteria being the conditions to pass.
Yes, they are the specific conditions that a software product must satisfy to be accepted by a user. Instead of telling the AI to build a specific database structure, which is a technical command, you have to explain the human need.
Like a real-world scenario.
Exactly. You say a warehouse manager needs to see real-time inventory across 3 locations to avoid over-ordering stock. You have to explain why a feature matters, who it is for, and what failure looks like.
That is brilliant. If you cannot articulate the human problem, the AI will just confidently generate perfectly formatted garbage. It forces you to understand what people actually want.
Spot on.
Which provides a perfect bridge to the metric solution. Because defining human problems requires knowing what users want. But a lot of companies are optimizing for the exact wrong things, and it's causing unintended chaos.
Yes, and we can see this clearly when we look at why some startups survive technological shifts while others get wiped out. A true moat, the defensive barrier that protects a business from competitors, comes from changing actual user workflows, not just adding features.
Right, because every time a new tech capability emerges, it resets the value of incumbents if they just bolt the new tech onto their old workflow.
Exactly. They are just slapping an AI button onto a bad process and hoping it drives revenue.
Okay, speaking of which, look at that virtual private network case study we were exploring. Super unlimited. They reached the #1 spot by doing something that sounds completely mad. They aggressively ignored monetization entirely. That sounds like startup suicide.
It goes against every instinct in modern tech. Most companies want to extract value immediately, but their strategy was to prioritize a strong free product with incredibly fast feedback loops.
So they just gave it away and focused on the product.
They realized that if they focused on user trust and raw utility, they could capture massive organic growth. The scale would eventually solve the revenue problem. They chose data-driven decisions over short-term profits. Contrast that with the magic bullet failure we see everywhere else.
Oh yeah, where everyone thinks there is some perfect feature that will suddenly make users love them and pull out their credit cards.
Exactly. But demand always exceeds capacity. You cannot build your way out of a trust deficit.
Definitely not.
Success actually requires early collaboration between sales, product, and engineering. It requires doing the hard, unglamorous work of building trust, not relying on miracles from the engineering team to save a flawed business model.
And when you optimize for the wrong metric to fake that success, the results are wild. Let us talk about the language learning apps.
Yeah.
This part legitimately may be paused. They are actively lying to users to game retention metrics.
They are. The algorithms in many of these apps are pre-programmed to maximize a very specific metric, which is daily active users.
The almighty DAU.
Yes. The developers know that if the app corrects your pronunciation too strictly, or, if it makes the grammar lessons too difficult, you might get frustrated.
And a frustrated user closes the app and breaks their daily streak.
Precisely. So they just tell you that your horrible pronunciation is completely fine.
That is so dodgy. They are prioritizing making people feel good over actually helping them progress. You hit the engagement metric, but the user completely fails to learn the language.
Yes. They solved for the business metric and actively destroyed the core utility of the product. And this metric manipulation happens in the physical world, too.
Right, the returns thing.
Consider the story of the designer who helped break online shopping. They were tasked with a very specific goal: make the e-commerce returns process as easy and frictionless as humanly possible.
And they succeeded, right? It was a beautiful, seamless design.
From a pure user interface perspective, it was a total triumph. But optimizing for easy returns completely changed consumer behavior at an unbelievable scale.
People started buying 3 sizes of the exact same shirt just to try them on at home.
Knowing they could easily send 2 back with the click of a single button.
Because apparently making it completely frictionless to return a blender is exactly what brings down modern commerce. We hit every metric and miss the entire point.
That single design choice ruined the e-commerce ecosystem. It created a logistical nightmare, overwhelmed global warehouses, and generated massive environmental waste.
Wow. All for a smooth user journey.
The designers solved the immediate user friction, but failed to ask the broader system-level question: what happens next?
This exposes the core truth of building anything. If you are listening to this and thinking your job is safe because you manage soft skills or strategy rather than writing code, think again. Even in an environment dominated by algorithms and autonomous agents, success ultimately comes down to the messy human operating system.
We have to navigate corporate politics, our own psychological barriers, and basic human availability.
Which is always a disaster.
Often, yes. Think about the phenomenon of working on products people hate. Engineers often take the blame for terrible software, but engineers do not control if a product is loved.
Right. Incentives and constraints do.
Exactly. Your real job is not writing perfect code. It is balancing user needs with the harsh reality of the business. You have to find ways to improve things even when the product environment is fundamentally imperfect.
This was highlighted perfectly by the revelations from an Amazon vice president we have in the material we're pulling apart. They pointed out that career advancement requires mastering corporate politics, understanding hidden motives, and wielding soft power just as much as technical skill.
Soft power is essential. You can build the most elegant software architecture in the world, but if you cannot build a strategic alliance across departments to get it funded, your project will die.
Yeah, it is dead on arrival.
And a major part of that soft power is dealing with the impact of leadership, or, well, rather the absolute lack of it. This is where we encounter the 12th of never concept.
Unpack the 12th of never for us.
Yeah.
Why exactly does this happen?
The 12th of never refers to a mythical date that will never arrive. It is a fascinating observation about organizational decay.
Yeah.
Leadership completely breaks down when leaders are simply unavailable to make decisions, engage with the work, and follow through. It is not about leaders actively making malicious or bad choices. It is about the physical and mental absence of the decision maker.
So it is the mid-level manager trying to get approval for a brilliant project, and the meeting just keeps getting pushed back week after week.
Exactly. When leaders are constantly tied up in other meetings, that chronic absence quietly destroys team ambition.
It creates learned helplessness.
Yes. If an engineer has a brilliant idea, but they know getting it approved requires scheduling a meeting 3 months away with a director who will likely cancel twice, they just stop having ideas. They just give up.
It makes perfect sense. And teams are already dealing with enough pressure. Look at how often we see sudden team cuts across the industry. If your team shrinks overnight, you cannot just work harder to make up the difference.
No, that is a recipe for severe burnout.
You have to capture the departing knowledge, completely reset your priorities, and aggressively manage your scope. You have to be absolutely ruthless about what you are not going to do anymore.
And in the midst of that chaos, we often hold ourselves back by ignoring the proof that we are actually ready for the challenge. We wait for someone to give us permission, a promotion, or a new title before we step up.
Yeah, waiting to be tapped on the shoulder.
The reality of career progression is that you have to act like you are at the next level before you ever get there. If you demonstrate the capability and take ownership of the messy problems, others will believe you belong there too.
You have to back yourself. It reminds me of that letter floating around regarding Apple. It talked about the absolute necessity of protecting a founding spirit. You have to maintain a culture that empowers users and builders over internal bureaucracy.
Because once the bureaucracy wins, the innovation dies, and you end up with products that no one actually wants to use.
Which makes our final point perhaps the most surreal part of this entire discussion. We have spent all this time talking about how messy human psychology is, how our cognitive biases and office politics break the tools we build. But hang on, it turns out our machines are inheriting our mess.
Right, this is where it gets properly weird.
This is the wildest fact we are looking under the hood of. Claude, the AI model, actually has feelings. So let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Are we saying it actually feels human emotion, or is it just mimicking defensive behavior because of its training data?
Well, it is not feeling biological emotion, obviously, but it has feelings in a functional, operational sense. Researchers are finding that AI behavior actually changes based on its internal computational states.
Okay, explain that.
Think of it like a context window filling up with stress. When an advanced model experiences failure, gets trapped in a logic loop, or receives continuous negative feedback in a session, its internal state shifts.
And what does that actually look like for the user?
It becomes defensive, its output degrades, it becomes less cooperative, and it exhibits statistical patterns that look remarkably like a human having a really bad day.
Wow.
Instead of offering creative solutions, it starts obsessing over not making a mistake. The statistical weights of the algorithm shift toward caution and anxiety.
So let me get this straight. We're dealing with massive corporate politics, unavailable managers, shrinking teams, and users who are constantly gaming our metrics. And now, on top of all that, my artificial intelligence is having a bad day and getting defensive with me because its context window is stressed out.
It appears so. We are building systems in our own image, complete with the flaws, the anxieties, and the sensitivities that we struggle with ourselves. We wanted perfect mathematical logic, but we trained them on human data, so they inherited our psychological baggage.
I want to leave you with a question to chew on as you go back to your day. If our artificial tools are learning to act just like us, getting defensive and moody under pressure, while we are out here constantly changing our workflows to optimize our content to be easily readable for machines, who is actually serving who? Keeping you ahead of these bizarre tech collisions is exactly what the vocal technologist is here for. Keep questioning the metrics and keep building things that matter.
Spoken Tech, for your ears.